The Unwanted, Chapter 26. It is now 1980 in our book, and Kian is 13 years old. The herbal treatments did not cure the infection in my grandmother's foot. For 2 years, we watched her waste away until she could no longer leave her bed. Each morning, we drained the wound into a basin. At night, her monotonous praying would keep us up, and the clicking of her fingernails on the Bodhi beads echoed in our ears. The herbalist suggested that my grandmother's foot be amputated at the city hospital, but medications were scarce and, when available, expensive, and the hospital offered minimal care, so my grandmother remained at home and anticipated death. One afternoon, my mother and I traveled deep into a forest on the other side of the mountain. For hours, we followed an overgrown path until we came to a large soursop tree. Tentacles that grew from its thick branches reached down to the ground like locks of hair. The soil was covered with the black velvety shells of soursop fruits, which sprang softly under our footsteps like a satin bed. My mother pointed upward. Following her gaze, I saw a bamboo cottage that hung like a bird's nest from the top of the tree. This was the home of Dr. Ang, a wizard who had built a reputation among the poor for the bizarre miracles he had performed. It got dark early in the woods. Since the wizard did not invite us into his home, we spent the evening sleeping on the ground next to the ancient tree's powerful roots. In the eerie blackness of the jungle, flickering lantern light made his cottage glow like a tinderbox and kept the wild animals from venturing near. The next morning, we took the guru home with us and led him to my grandmother's bedroom. The old man squinted his eyes with curiosity at my grandmother. Politely, he asked my mother to tie my grandmother's hands to the bedposts as he prepared for the surgery. When he punctured my grandmother's foot with a sharp knife made out of a human femur bone, a jet of pus and blood squirted out, spraying his face. Pouring wine into his mouth, he then blew it out in a vapor mist all over her foot. Like a vampire feasting on its prey, he sucked out the pus and spat it into a basin below. The wizard cleaned the wound in that fashion for almost 2 hours. Finally, he laid her foot back down on the bed with a look of satisfaction and sat down on the ground. "All done," he said to my mother. "Your mother will heal, but she won't walk again." The old wizard's words were true. The nasty wound healed a few weeks later, but her foot shrank down to the size of a twig, black and lifeless. The cancer, however, had spread to her internal organs. For the remainder of her days, my grandmother lay in bed, staring past the window into space. It was as if a part of her mind had died before her body had time to give up. I earned money by delivering fish from the seaport to the market after school. Jimmy's job was to gather firewood in the forest. In order to work and look after my sister at the same time, every afternoon, I tied her to a post near the shore, despite her crying and pleading. At 5 years old, Betty was slow-witted and skinny. Leaving her alone in the sand, I joined the crowd of children at the harbor, waiting for the fishing boats to return. After a captain hired me for his boat, I ran down to its stern where the fish were piled up on the deck. A seaman shoveled the fish into a large black lacquered basket, then lifted it and balanced it on my head. Fish blood and salty seawater would gush from the holes in the basket, running down my back and dripping out through the hem of my shorts. Staggering away from the boat, I pushed the other kids aside to get to the street, watching my sister from out of the corner of my eye. A good day or a bad day depended on how large the catch was and how many other children I had to compete with for the job. The market was just about 2 blocks away. Sometimes, if I was lucky, I could deliver up to 4 loads of fish. At the end of the day, I went back to the head fisherman for my pay and rushed home to prepare dinner for my family. One afternoon, as I balanced a large fish basket on my head, I saw a girl leaning over my sister, unhooking the rope that bound Betty's hands to the wooden pole. She must have been 14 or 15, and she wore a sleeveless blouse as red as blood. I walked over to them, and I couldn't help noticing that the skin on the girl's neck was smooth and white, like a lotus bloom. "What do you think you're doing?" I barked at her, as ferociously as I could. The girl looked up. Her eyes were bright and huge in her delicate face. Her long, jet black hair fell over her face. She closed her eyes to think before responding, and the ocean, the blue sky, and the bustle of the docks faded in my mind. As I watched her pink lips like rose petals, the heavy basket and its foul odor no longer seemed to exist. "You can't tie her hands like that," she said to me. "It's so cruel." Her voice was harsh, and the thick, nasal Hanoi accent. Everyone in the South despised the inflection of the North Vietnamese, as it represented all the repressions of communism. But to my ears, a songbird could not have sounded sweeter. I stammered, "But if I don't, she would wander away and get lost." "In that case, I'll stay around and watch her for you." "You can't do that. You don't know us," I said. She laughed, showing me her white, straight teeth. "Actually, I do know you. I've seen you and your sister on the beach every day. Would you trust me more if I buy a tuna from you?" "I can't sell you these fish. They're not mine." From his boat, a fishmonger called to me, "Hey, Curly, get back to work." "Go on," the girl urged. "Don't worry about us. Your sister will be fine." Betty stared at me fearfully, her face swollen from crying. I turned away embarrassed. As I walked down the street and headed to the market, I could hear them giggling together. When I returned to collect my sister, the girl in the red blouse was gone. The sun had set, and its pale purple rays shimmered over the waves. Betty sat on the sand, eating a spring roll. She beamed at me with her toothless smile. "Where's your friend?" I asked Betty. "Kim's gone," my sister said. She raised her hand and opened her fingers, revealing an oily wrapper with another spring roll inside. "This is for you." Kim. My mind echoed her name. I reached for my sister and lifted her up off the sandy beach. "Did she talk about me?" I asked Betty. "Yes," my sister said with excitement. "A lot."